Good morning. This is our second lesson on meditation. And most of the scriptures, all the scriptures that we talk about today will be well known to you. My goal is, and at least for me, to connect some dots that I haven't seen connected before. And I thought we might just start with a very quick, short refresher on what we covered already. And so we started off with our reading last week in Joshua, and we'll just read verse 8. God speaking to Joshua says, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you," I got to make sure my curse is on. Sorry about that. I always forget. "Shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous and have success." So the key phrase here is God instructing Joshua to meditate on things day and night. Now that was probably what we would call most of the time spontaneous. Spontaneous. All the time he's working and he's in love with God. He's thinking about his law. He has huge responsibility on his shoulders. He's in charge. He's the head guy for all of Israel. And probably on his mind all the time because people are always looking at him as an example or to find fault. But he meditates day and night, and most of that I would assume is just spontaneous. He's ready at all times when he gets a moment to talk to God or to think about God. And we said that prayer and meditation are different, so closely intertwined. I don't know if one exists very often without the other, but prayer is speaking directly to God and praising Him and asking Him for guidance and pleading Him for help in certain areas or for other people. Meditation is thinking about God, His glory, His goodness, His power, His trustworthiness. And so probably for you too, I'm meditating about God, and I have to say thank you for that. I'm blown away that you love me that much. Or I really need to work on this. God, do you have any, what scriptures would be the best for me? So they're intertwined, but prayer and meditation are different. We said that last week. The second one we looked at last week, another one that we looked at that last week is set your mind on the things above, not on the things on earth. And Paul, who wrote this, is going to talk about a whole bunch of the things that are on earth, immorality and greed and bad things. And he's saying, don't focus on those. Don't set your mind on those. Don't desire those. Set your mind on the higher things, the good things, the spiritual things. Heaven too, but not just the river of life. I think it's the opposite of what he mentioned don't look at. So it's all the goodness that we want to have in our life to be like Jesus. So this, I would assume, more of the time, setting our mind means fixed on it. It means I'm going for it. I'm not letting go. This is higher priority. It's so much better than all the garbage that still tempts my flesh, but I'm not letting go. I'm locked in. And I think a lot of times that kind of setting our mind on the things above takes intense thought. And I would say that some of the time that's going to be your scheduled, planned meditation, where you take time with God, find a quiet place, quiet time, and you commune and you think about important things. So we talked about both of those. And then we mentioned that, just my opinion, based upon, I think, some facts, though, that meditation seems to be a low priority to many Christians. I stated that I looked at 12 different churches, their archived sermons for 10 to 12 years. So at least 7,000 sermons, probably 9,000 sermons. I found two sermons on meditation Only 2 churches out of 12 over a long period of time had any sermons on meditation. And as I said, the cool thing is, Sumner was one of them. It wasn't me, but Sumner was one of them, and Kirkland was the other. But I say, 7,000 sermons, 12 churches, and no one talks about it, no one preaches about it. It seems to be an indicator that we don't give it a lot of priority. But then, in my experience as a Christian, I'm hard-pressed to think of a conversation I've had with anybody about meditation. That's also an indicator. I've talked about prayer with people and lots of things, but it just seems to me that it's a low priority, and if it's a low priority, that probably means there's things we have not considered about it that we might want to know about. So today is going to be meditation and how it fits into the big picture. So meditation part 2, but how it fits into the big picture. And so I would ask, if I were to ask you what is the big picture, that's unfair because it's not Bible terminology. If I asked you, on the other hand, what is the main goal of every Christian? What does God tell us that our main goal should be? That's a little easier. I'll bet a bunch of you would get it. You will certainly know the scriptures that I will talk about in just a moment. But before I go on, there are 2 types of meditation. One is spontaneous. You're driving, you're walking, you're in your office, wherever, and you're thinking about the Lord, and it's spontaneous. It's good, it's quality, it glorifies Him. Just like anybody that wants to be loved by you, when we think about them, they're uplifted. So spontaneous is valuable. Spontaneous meditation is valuable and glorifies God, but we're going to be focused more on the scheduled, planned out, purposeful meditation. I won't say that every time. I'm just letting you know that's kind of where the lesson's leading towards is the planned, scheduled, purposeful thinking about God and spiritual things. So, here are the main points. What is the big picture for Christians? Second, how does meditation affect the big picture? And then we're going to take a glimpse at, just a brief glimpse at, meditation in action, how we might use it in our own lives. I like people that know about computers, like Jeff or Scott. I want them to show me baby steps and explain it to me in simple ways, and I'll try to do that today. All right? So, what is the big picture for Christians? And a lot of you could probably guess that, but we're going to look at Matthew 22, 37 through 40, because that's the big picture. That's the main goal. That's the reason why God says how we're to operate on life. So, Jesus speaking, and He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment, the top one, the most important, the foremost. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." We see 3 places where our love is to be focused: God, the neighbor, and even ourself. I think we struggle, I do, with loving myself sometimes, but it is not just scriptural, it's expected and necessary to love ourselves. In spite of the flaws that we know better than anybody, that is the big picture. Love God, neighbor, self. The big picture of Christianity. I think we can probably do it. But because this is the groundation, the foundation of every single thing we do, every thought, every action, that if we're ever asked, well Justin, why are you a Christian or Christine? what's the big deal about Christianity? Without hesitation, we should say, here's what it's built upon. There is a God. And so Christianity is built upon loving God with everything you have, loving your other people, because that's what a neighbor is, all people, and loving yourself. We should just be able to, bam, that's the big picture. And as we live, as we operate, function day to day, that should be on our minds at all times. All times. This should be on our minds so much. And this is what I don't know. I haven't asked, well, I asked one today, but this big picture should be on our minds so much that all of our children, if they can count to 30, they should be able to tell you what the big picture is, what the goal of Christianity is. It's so important. You know the passage in Deuteronomy that I'll pull up in just a minute. But even our kids, they need to know why they're here. Why do we do this, Mommy? Why do we do this, Daddy? Why do we go every Sunday? Why can't we play? Or whatever it is. They need to understand what the big picture is. As soon as they're old enough to comprehend it, they should be able to tell us and other people what it is. That said, that there's this big picture, the other thought that I want to share with you that you know, but I want to spit it out. We have new Christians here. We have non-Christians here. Is this, that Jesus tells us in verse 40 of Matthew 22, on these two commandments, we're not commanded to love ourselves there, but the concept is throughout the Bible. We're made in God's image. No one else is like us. We're special. We are to love ourselves. So the two commandments, love God, love your neighbor. On these two things, every single command in the Bible, every prophecy, all of it is grounded, depends upon these precepts. And so, if you take out these commands right here out of the Bible, you take out love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. You take those out, you know how many commands you have left? 0. There isn't a command in the Bible that isn't directly related to and connected to and dependent upon this. Jesus said so. On these two commandments depend the whole law. There isn't a single good thing that you can do that isn't connected to loving God or your neighbor or yourself. None. Because all of them depend upon this big picture or this main goal right here. So our children should be able to answer the question, what's the big picture? What's the main goal? What's the purpose of a Christian's life? They should be able to tell quickly, love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. So, confession time again. I think it's important for preachers, especially those of us who are flawed, which is all of us, to let you know our struggles sometimes or our failures. And so I love teaching kids classes 18 months through college. I loved it. I've taught hundreds in 20-some plus years. I've been a Christian longer, but I haven't taught in a while. Hundreds of young people. And my suspicion is this, that if you talked to my young people, whether in Truth Talk or in the Bible classes, if you said, what is the big picture? Or more biblically, what is the reason for Christians' lives here? What is God's expectation? If you were to ask hundreds of them, my suspicion is hardly any would know. You know, you might say, what is the greatest commandment? They all know, because I talk about that. But I've never boiled it down to, this is it. Without this, I've understood it, but without this, there's nothing. And I've never said, before they leave my class for the court or whatever, they need to have this down. I've not done that. I don't know about our kids. You teachers should. You know. And so that would be my question to you, though, is do all of our children from what, 7 years and up, do they know what the greatest goal is for every Christian according to Jesus? And so if they do, hallelujah, and that's my hope. If they don't, let's change it. Let's change it right away. Let's change it this quarter. But this is it. And although most of us have always known, and maybe all that what the greatest commandment is, I just never boiled it down to its essence and how critically important it is to have on our mind all the time as we weigh making decisions. Should I do this? Well, does it have to do with loving God, loving neighbor, loving myself? And we use that as our judgment point. Does it fit that right there? So when we think about the big picture, the overall goal for every Christian, every single choice we make is connected to it. I said that already. No choice is neutral, not one. When we make a choice, when we do something, we either enhance the greatest commandment of loving God, loving our neighbor or ourselves. We either enhance that or we hinder it. But I don't believe there's a neutral decision that you can make that doesn't feed into or rest on that foundation. And so take something mundane. I'm just going to really break it down, and forgive me if I'm being too basic here, but take something basic like driving to work. All three are affected. If we honor the laws of the land, commanded to in Romans 13 and other places, if we honor the laws of the land, we're loving God, because Jesus said in John 14:15, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And one of the commandments is to obey the laws of the land. So driving to work absolutely either shows your love for God or it hinders it. It detracts from it. But it also shows your love for your neighbor, because if we're courteous, and I know that probably all of you are, but if we're courteous and we don't shake our fist when they do something stupid, just like we do something stupid sometimes, but we are courteous and, or we're obeying the laws, which keeps them safer, that's enhancing our love for our neighbor. And finally, it also affects our love for ourselves, because bad driving endangers our own life, and we have responsibilities and loved ones, and we're influencers. So it's something as mundane as driving to work. When you watch what you watch on TV or on your computer, that feeds right into the greatest commandment. Some of it is so unfit for human consumption that if we watch it, it certainly hinders love for ourselves, because it hurts us. It doesn't help us. But same with loving God in that one as well. Here's another one. Fingers pointed at me again. But so how you talk to your loved ones when you're irritated with them. How we talk to them when we're irritated with them, that also shows a love for God by loving our wife as for a husband, as Christ loved the church. It shows our love for them, courteous, gentle, kind. It shows our love for ourselves, because he who loves his wife loves himself, Ephesians chapter 5. All these things, every one. And if you can think of a command that doesn't rest on one of those three or all of them, let me know, not now, but let me know. But I think you're going to be hard-pressed to come up with one. Every choice, every action is related to the big picture. And it's the core of everything we do. So I know this is basic, and I apologize if it's boring you, but I'd rather overemphasize something than underteach it and have us miss something this valuable. So how does meditation, I said I'd show you this, Deuteronomy. The main thing in Deuteronomy 6 is this. I ask, can your children tell you what the main goal is for every Christian? Well, in Deuteronomy, Old Law, it says, speaking of the words of God, it says, you shall teach them diligently to your sons. And that's not sons as in boys. You can look it up. It's sons as in children, just like in Spanish. Hijos means sons, but if you're talking about a group, it's boys and girls, sons and daughters. Anyway, you shall diligently teach it to your children, sons and daughters. And then you shall talk of them when you sit in your house. I missed the boat. I mean, I loved God. My children know that I did. We talked about spiritual things sometimes, but I didn't reinforce the importance of this one right here. You talk about it when you walk by the way, when you lie down, or when you rise up. In other words, it's constantly on our mind because our entire spiritual lives need it and depend upon it. So how does meditation... Let's see, I've got a little bit more here, don't I? I said that already. No choice neutral. Okay, we did all that. How does meditation now affect the big picture? How does it affect the big picture? Well, number one, anything that we do, think or do, anything that we do takes thought. I mean, there's a few things that don't. They're important. Breathing, heartbeat, hearing, those are all automatic. But almost everything that we do that's important takes thought. We decide this or this. I'll go here or stay home. I'll treat them this way or this way. But everything we do, including reading the Bible, listening, and being a good student of the Acts class that Bill teaches, everything that builds on the greatest commandments takes thought. And so, since meditation has to do with thinking, there isn't a single aspect of our lives that can't be improved, strengthened, or enhanced by meditation. Because everything we do that's important takes thought. So we meditate, we can enhance it. Just simple, I know. But it affects every area. The meditation, as well as the great commandments, affect every area of our life. So, very few don't require thought, and you can't control those or you die if you don't breathe or your heart isn't beating. So how does meditation affect the big picture? Well, it influences every important area of your life, as we said already. Correction. Giving correction, no fun. Receiving correction, not too bad, but important that we're open to both. This has to do with loving God, loving your neighbor, loving yourself. Sunday morning Acts class, serving as an effective Bible teacher. We have some incredible Bible teachers in our congregation, some incredible ones, but it's not by accident. It's hard work, and whether you meditate about it or not, and you probably do, if you meditate it and say, Lord, thank you for this incredible privilege of influencing lives maybe forever, help me be a good teacher. Pray, Lord, that they'll see my love for you. But there's so many things to think about. Help me teach your word in a way that really is clear and helpful to them. So we meditate on all these important things. Our marriage relationship, so critical. Raising godly children. How to make a living. And last week we talked about one thing I want to mention again. And that is that intimacy, closest with another person or with God, doesn't happen by accident. It's always intentional. Intimacy is always intentional. And so meditation is one thing that fosters our intimacy with God. We think about Him, so we pray, appreciate Him more and trust Him more, then we talk to Him. But our meditation and prayer, because they're inseparable, they foster our relationship and intimacy with God Himself. So finally, back to meditation. It influences every important area of our life. And Proverbs 23:7 says this, for as he, it's talking about a person, for as he thinks within himself, so is he. That has to do with thought. That has to do with meditation. Now, maybe some people never meditate, but still, they have thoughts. Maybe they're selfish thoughts. But whatever a person's thoughts are, that's the real person. Maybe not the person we see for a while, but our thoughts determine who we are. And so meditation is just so invaluable. How does meditation affect the big picture? Well, we looked at this earlier today and last Sunday, but God told Joshua to meditate day and night on His law, but look at the follow-up on that. Here are the consequences. He says, Joshua, but it applies to everybody. If you meditate on my laws day and night, God will make him prosperous. It will make your way prosperous, and you will have success. That's just a spiritual truth. Doesn't mean you won't break your leg. Doesn't mean somebody won't be mean to you or persecute you. But that's not the big picture. Big picture is loving God, loving neighbor, loving self, and going home someday to be with our Father and a brother. That's true success. So meditation will improve every area of life that involves thinking, and almost all areas do involve thinking. So if I were listening to this sermon, here's the question, and I was a new Christian, here's the question I would ask. So what are you saying? You're saying that meditation, it's influenced by and it affects our primary goal. Either hinders or helps loving God, loving neighbor, loving self. So can I be saved if I don't have planned, scheduled meditation? Can I still be saved? Because it is a Bible concept. And in my opinion, I'm not the final judge. My opinion is, of course you can be. Of course you can be. Can you love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, love your neighbor, love yourself, without planning your meditation out? Of course. Many of you do, and I don't know how many of you plan your meditation, but I told you before, the only day I do is Saturday, and I've only been doing that for a year or two. But I think I'm right with God. So can you be saved without scheduling your meditation? In my opinion, yes. But choosing not to schedule meditation time is like choosing to walk on glass with your bare feet when you have a choice to wear shoes. Most people won't do that. Why would we want to go through life like I have for 70 years without making more of my meditation time? Planning it out and scheduling it. Why would I want to do that? I mean, God, it's a gift. Meditation is a gift from God. He tells us that it will have an effect, and it does. It's a promise. God always tells the truth. So if we take a few tools here, talking about using the right tool, because God gives us meditation to help us. And so this picture coming up right here, I got another mark that isn't going away. This picture right here is this screwdriver right here. Now it's really, they sold it as a screwdriver for $7. I bought two in Texas. But it's really a pry bar, hammer, dandelion weeder. I mean, I love this thing, and the other one is in worse shape. I couldn't find it. I would have brought it. But see the end of it right here? This is the end. that you can't see very well, but this is the end right here. It's cracked. That's because I didn't use the right tool. Now, you can use, and I did, the reason it's cracked, you can use a screwdriver. I haven't practiced, so if I squeal, it's just because I hit my fingers. But you can use a screwdriver to drive a nail. But you probably get tendonitis. Probably take you a year to make a dog house. But you can do it. You can do it. It'll work. And you can go through life without planning your meditation ever. Just spontaneous, which is great stuff. You can do that. But man, I mean, I'm not going to hit it too hard because I'll go into the metal. But, you use the right tool. You're going to be through the wood in a jiffy. And I'm just saying that I think that that's what planned meditation is a tool to enhance our lives, to make them better, to focus on the right things with real intention. Let's go. So we want to look at a glimpse of meditation in action. A couple of things. Now, already today and last Sunday, we talked about setting your mind, because we're talking about intentional, scheduled, planned meditation. Setting your mind on the things above. And boy, that means I'm locked in, I'm fixed, I'm not letting go. I want that, not this. And so we're setting our minds like it's fixed in concrete. Okay, you got that. But moving on in the same chapter. If we read Colossians 3:12, so as those who've been chosen of God, holy and beloved, God loves us. And He does. We should love ourselves, flaws and all. Holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. Big deals, really important activities, actions that we need to have. But check out verse 14. Beyond all these things, beyond all those good things, beyond all of them, above, superior, greater in importance, beyond all these things, put on love. Back to the big picture. That is the core. That is the foundation. Love. And Paul is saying so here in Colossians 3 and verse 14. That's it. That's the big picture. Let's move on. So we've got the big picture. What happens next? In verse 15, he says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. The word let is not there. In fact, it really weakens the message. To which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. More importantly, 16, let the word of Christ richly dwell in you within. Let the word of Christ richly dwell within you with all wisdom. The word let, most of the time, it's not in the Greek, and I'll show you in just a minute. It's not there. Let is kind of passive. Andy, would you let me pick apples off of your tree? Would you let me? What action is required on your part? None. None. Just allowing me to. So let a lot of times means allow. That's not what this is saying. It is not saying allow the word of Christ to dwell richly within you. It doesn't say that. Not even close. It's much stronger than that. If we look at the Greek, I put it in the English letters. The word, ha logos, of Christ, ha Christos. I won't try to pronounce the next one, but richly dwell in you. The cool thing about Greek is you can tell when a word is a statement of fact. If it's a command, it's spelled differently. The letters at the end of the word are different. Guess what this is? This is a command, a strong command. It's not saying let, like, oh, allow. It's not saying that. It's saying choose to have the word of Christ. Choose it, decide on it, make it happen. To have the word of Christ dwell in you. Now, could I do as good a job? Number one, I'm not fluent. I know how to look it up, and I know some Greek, but it's difficult taking important messages in one language and put them in another, because you can't write 10 words for every single word. They have to be concise. They have to keep the Bible, it's already huge, right? They have to keep it in a manageable size, so let's put let, but it really, really, really weakens the message. The command is, make it happen so that Christ's word dwells in you. Well, how do you do that? Doesn't that sound a lot like meditation? For it to dwell in us, first we have to consume it like food. Blessed is he who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, Jesus says. So we read the word of Christ. It's not dwelling in us richly yet. There's only one way to make that happen. That's a conscious thought process. Wow, I'm falling short in this area. I need to pump it up so my kids see a good example, or my fellow brothers and sisters see an example. But to allow it to make it dwell in us, that involves meditation, spontaneous or planned. It still takes serious meditation. I wanted to point that out. We're not going to dwell a lot on these, but a couple of real-life examples of ongoing struggle and meditation and how it brings success. So let's look at two verses here. Colossians 2:7. I ran into this one where it stuck, where I saw it and said, whoa, about 8 years ago, where it says to all Christians, having been firmly rooted and now being built up in him, Christ, and established in your faith, just as you were instructed, and overflowing with gratitude. I don't have that down yet. 8 years now. I'm better. Even in the last 3 months, I can see a difference. I just tell myself the truth when I'm not overflowing, and I'm not overflowing with gratitude nearly enough. But I never meditated on it except spontaneously once in a while. I'm changing that. So if you, like me, maybe you already do, but if you don't overflow with gratitude and you want to, we read it, then we spend time on it, chewing it in our minds. How could I do that? What does that look like? Dear God, help me do better at it so I'm more like Jesus. We pray, we meditate, we practice, we evaluate. Hey, this last week was better. I was full of much more gratitude than I normally am. Same with grumbling. I mean, to me, the two go together. When I'm not overflowing with gratitude, I'm much more likely to growl. You know, it's a tough day, and not one, not two, not three, but 5 things go wrong, and there's frustration. And I realize now, because being a Bible student for a while, that grumbling is condemned by God. Talks about it in 1 Corinthians 10:10 and Old Testament a lot. I realize when I do that, I used to think, I'm just mad at the situation. I'm just, but no. It's really a form of complaining about my life. And if I complain about my life, I'm really complaining about God. That's why he destroyed so many people that grumbled in the Old Testament. It really reflects on him rather than, okay, Lord, this really frustrates me. But you're aware of what's going on. You've given me the ability to praise you in spite of this stuff. And maybe, just maybe, you're wanting someone else to learn from my good example. And so these are just examples of things that I definitely need to work on. And meditation is enhancing that already. Even the last week that I've been focused on it, feeling even better about it. So when we meditate, just 3 helpful questions. We're almost wrapping up here. We'll get to the last slide in a minute. But here's some helpful questions when we meditate. One would be, if we're reading the Word, let the Word of Christ richly dwell in you, we might ask 3 questions. What does this truth teach me about God? Or what does it teach me about Jesus? But they're both deity. What does it teach me about my Savior? What does it teach me about myself? And lastly, how, if I get this down, understand it, and apply it, how might this transform my life or transform my thinking? Just simple questions. What does it teach me about God? What does it teach me about myself? How might this, if I utilize it, transform my life and my thinking? I talked about intimacy occurs on purpose. That's what we are doing when we're meditating and praying, because the two almost always go hand in hand. So we meditate on purpose, whether it's spontaneous or planned. Increases our intimacy with God. And like last week, I'd like to offer you a challenge. And at least one person volunteered that they accepted the challenge last week, and I'm sure more of you did. But the challenge is this. It's worded a little differently, but choose a minimum, brothers and sisters. Choose a minimum of one time this week. A planned, quiet time, quiet place. Just choose one. 10 minutes or whatever you think, if you're not used to it, that will fit you. And you're going to love the results, but even more importantly, so will God, your Father in heaven. That's it on meditation. I'm 21. I have the idea mulling around. Not sure if we'll go to meditation or this other one, or if I'll blend the two. But thank you for your patience. I hope somebody gained something good out of this. I want to thank once again the person that suggested preaching on this. I've been greatly blessed by having to work on it. So if you have a spiritual need, like to become a Christian today, just come forward while you stand and sing the song of invitation.